My spider sense tingling. I need to do a ranking. Hello everyone, Classical Geek here, and welcome back to a brand new video. And today, I'm going to be ranking all 8 Spider-Man movies from worst to best. So this will include the Sam Raimi trilogy, the 2 Amazing Spider-Man movies, the 2 MCU movies, and Into the Spider-Verse. So we're not including Venom because Spider-Man doesn't appear in Venom, so it's not a Spider-Man movie. Now, I love Spider-Man. He's probably my favourite. He's probably my favourite superhero. Probably my favourite sort of comic book character. I just find him so cool and just so relatable. Like, he's just this nerdy kid like myself, and he just gets just by chance he just gets bitten by a spider, and he gets his cool powers, and then he uses them for good. It's really relatable, and that's why I love Spider-Man. It's just so relatable. So I'm ranking all 8 of his movies. So let's get to it. Coming in last place is The Amazing Spiderman 2. This film is just an absolute mess. Like, there is just too much in there. There's far too many characters, far too many villains, far too many plots, and they're just fighting for space in this mess of a film. The villains in this are just garbage. Like, the Rhino is abysmal. Green Goblin in this is just, I just can't stand him. And Electro is the best, but that's not saying much because he still turns into a villain. Like, he goes from this confused guy with these electric powers to evil in a matter of seconds. Like, what's that about? In fairness, Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone are very good as Peter and Gwen, and Gwen's death scene is quite powerful, so I'll give it that. I also think the web swinging scenes are some of the best in the franchise, but other than that, it's just a really poor movie, and because we got nothing from it, the ending is just such a downer note, and it really puts me in just a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. In 7th place, we have The Amazing Spiderman. If I had to describe this film in one word, it would be dull. It's just so dull. It's just a paint-by-numbers remake of the 2002 movie, and I just find it incredibly dull and forgettable. The plot's boring, the action's boring for the most part, except for the school fight, because that's quite good. The characters, except for Peter and Gwen, they're quite good, but other than that, the characters are dull. The villain's dull. The lizard is just such a boring villain, and such a bland design without that lab coat. Because, first of all, I don't want to see a naked lizard. Have some common decency. And second, it's just such a bland design. It doesn't have anything distinct about it. And that's how I would sum this entire film up. It doesn't have anything distinct about it. Say what you will about, like, Spider-Man 3 with its cringy dancing. At least you remember it. This, I don't. Speaking of... At number 6, we have Spider-Man 3. Now, I don't hate this film. It has some very major flaws with it, but I don't hate it. It's a bit like Amazing Spider-Man 2, where it has too many ideas, too many villains, too many characters, too many plot lines to juggle, and they don't always pay off. Unlike Amazing Spider-Man 2, some of those plot points in this film are actually interesting. You know, the Sandman stuff I quite enjoy, the Green Goblin stuff with Harry Osborn, it's actually more interesting because we've spent time with this Harry Osborn in the previous 2 films, so we feel more of a connection to him. I also think the action in this film is quite good, quite creative, and this is probably Mary Jane's best outing in these 3 films, Kirsten Dunst's Mary Jane. But it does have major problems. The Venom storyline is really poorly done. It feels really just sort of crowbarred in. And Jesus Christ, the emo Peter Parker dancing, the street dancing is bad enough. But the nightclub dancing is just on another level of painful. But if you can get over those things, it is a somewhat entertaining film. At number 5, I have Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, I really enjoy this movie. I think Tom Holland's great as Spider-Man, probably my favourite cinematic Spider-Man. I love Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. I think everybody does. Michael Keaton as the Vulture is one of not only the best MCU villains, but also one of the best Spider-Man villains on screen. He's just got this real presence, but he's just a normal guy, and that's what makes him so threatening, is that he's so relatable. It's very real, and that's what makes him work. I also like the tone of the film. It very much feels like a John Hughes 80s teen movie, and you guys know how much I love Ferris Bueller's Day Off and Breakfast Club and all that movies, so this is right up my alley. And I like how small scale it is. It's less sort of, it's not the fate of the universe, it's a more personal story for Peter Parker learning to, you know, be Spider-Man just without the, you know, all the Tony Stark gubbins in the suit. So that's a really nice way to take it. However, I've got to say, some of the humour really doesn't land for me. There's some humour that does, but just others which just feel quite just jarring, just not funny. At number 4, we have Spider-Man Far From Home, the most recent Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. And what I love most about this film is, like Homecoming, it feels very small scale, and it feels like a nice epilogue to the Infinity Saga after Endgame. It's a nice and small scale, and it deals with the death of Tony Stark quite well. I think the action's great. I think Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio is a great villain, very charismatic, and plays on Peter's sort of naivety and willingness to help, and I quite like that. I also love the action, and I love how how sort of the themes of technology and how they're sort of being abused, obviously like by Mysterio in this case. I think that's quite a good sort of message for today's society and how it can be manipulated. It can manipulate the facts, and I really like that angle. Whether or not it was intentional, that's how I interpret it, and I really like that. However, there are some problems. Once again, the humour just falls flat sometimes. I think the Tony Stark death should have been explored a bit further. And I really don't like the end credits with the scrolls. It's just like, it does not need to be there. And it just takes away, it's really disappointing that it wasn't Nick Fury after all. That really irks me. At number 3, we have Spider-Man 2. Now, a lot of people probably have this at the top of their list. I'm not going to go that far, but it is still a fantastic film. I love the dynamics of the characters. So, Peter and MJ, Peter and Harry Osborn, Peter and Aunt May. They're great. Doc Ock is a phenomenal villain, probably my favourite Spider-Man villain on screen. The train sequence, the action scene, is one of the best in superhero film history. The final fight is also really great, and it builds upon the first film, and I just really love it for that. If there's one criticism I have, is that I'm always a bit lukewarm on the Peter not wanting to be Spider-Man plotline, but otherwise, it's a fantastic film. At number 2, I have Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Now, this film is absolutely incredible. All the Spider people are great. Miles Morales is a great lead. Peter B. Parker is so funny. Spider-Gwen's great. Nicolas Cage as Spider-Noir is hilarious. Spider-Ham and Penny Parker, they're all great. Kingpin is a really cool villain with a really sort of great motivation. And the animation is gorgeous. It looks like a comic book come to life. And I'm pretty sure it's because it's at a different frame rate. But it just looks like a comic book come to life. And all the colours, it uses so many colours. It's honestly a treat for the eyes. And it wholeheartedly deserved its Oscar for Best Animated Feature. And coming in at number 1 is the original Spider-Man from 2002. Now, you've got to put your mindset, it was 2002. We were getting comic book films like Batman and Robin, Steel. And the only decent ones we ever got were like Blade and X-Men. So this was just fantastic. It's a comic book film which properly embraced its goofy roots, which is something we don't see anymore with all the gritty stuff. But it knew when to go dark and more brutal and more serious, which is perfect for a comic book movie. You need to have that right balance, and this gets it down to a T. Yeah, Tobey Maguire is fantastic as Peter Parker, as the nerd, but as Spider-Man, as the hero. He's just got great range in this film. Uncle Ben and Aunt May are great. The villain, Green Goblin, Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, is fantastic. I even quite like, honestly, I quite like Harry Osborn. I genuinely do. The action's really good, if a little dated in certain areas when it comes to like the CGI. But I can look past that because, it was done really well. And for its time, it was the perfect comic book movie and the perfect origin movie. And I will always respect it for helping get superhero movies back on track for me.